Well, Simba, it's great to have you here today on Between Two Quarters. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, happy to be here.
As our audience will soon find out, you're the founder and CEO of Laborup, and MVP Capital is one of your seed investors.
Yep.
That's our connection. And today on Between Two Quarters, what I really wanted to dig into is a couple things. One, your founder story and how you built the company. And then two, I want to get into the weeds a little bit on commercialization, how you're thinking about customers, how you're thinking about converting pilots to paid, all the things that every founder goes through, but maybe we don't talk about publicly quite enough. But kicking it off first, let's talk about the founding story. Can you tell me about how you came up with Laborup and what led to the launch of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So Laborup is an AI-powered platform that solves hiring for industrial companies. So this is well documented. There's a massive labor crisis in the industrial economy affecting almost every industry where people make things, manufacturing, construction, but we're starting with solving just the manufacturing space. So I used to be a manufacturing engineer. I worked in oil and gas, in automotive, and these different industries. And we always struggled with finding the skilled blue-collar workforce. Not the people that get a 4-year college degree. LinkedIn has kind of solved that. But those maintenance techs, those machinists, these are the bulk of people that actually work these factories. And the problem has persisted since time. But I think before, there wasn't this like major initiative around reshoring and bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. But if you look at the past 5 years, that's been a big theme across both administrations. And we've invested a lot of money to build these factories across critical industries like energy, aerospace, you name it. But the problem that persists today is actually people, because there's two things you need to run a factory: people and machines. So the impetus for Laborup is really just that market pull and that market need that's getting even more crazy right now. And then actually technology enabling platforms that couldn't be created before. Because if you think about how recruiting has worked over the last 2-3 decades, it's really traditional staffing. So you think the big companies that I won't name, but they're kind of calling people, getting them to come on site, reviewing them, screening them. It's very manual and people driven. And now with these large language models, there's an opportunity to really reinvent and augment what that looks like using voice AI, these LLMs, because at the end of the day, the job of recruiting is taking information in, making sense of it, and then actually making a decision on hiring someone. These technology with people in the process do that really well. So when you combine what's happening in the market and this massive need and technology that enables new platforms, that's why we exist.
Very, very cool. So as you said, you started your career out after college in manufacturing, like Bayer and other like large companies that are doing complicated manufacturing. Were you there doing your engineering job and saying like, I have to build a company to solve this, or did that occur to you later on? When was it?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say later on. So at the time I was like knees deep into chemical engineering, making pharmaceuticals and all this other stuff, and even in the oil and gas industry with like Dow Chemical. So I wasn't really thinking about that, but I've always been a problem solver, which is why I went into engineering in the first place. I like solving people's problems, and even in that context, I love spending time with customers actually. So the ones we're making the stuff for. And I would say, I mean, one of the things I've always done is just look for problems. It can be a good thing or a bad thing, especially in your personal life. But I think hiring was always something that we always kind of struggled with, that we were always trying to solve, that we were spending a lot of money on. It was a big line item on the P&L. But yeah, I wasn't thinking about starting this, so.
So then fast forward to you're at Stanford getting your master's. What was it that got you to say, this is the right time to start Laborup?
Yeah, so there's actually a micro personal component. So I was actually catching up with an old mentor of mine who had kind of been an HR manager at Northrop Grumman, who really cares about like aerospace and defense companies and all this stuff. And she was just talking about all the problems that manufacturing companies are facing. So this was about a year and a half ago to 2 years ago. And then it was just, so this problem that I kind of faced and kind of lived through many years ago still is persisting today, and now you have the backdrop of all the macro stuff. And then at the same time, while I was at Stanford, I was spending time at two places. The Hoover Institution, which is kind of like this political think tank within Stanford, so the former Secretary of Defense is there, and you're hearing a lot of these like macro issues around, hey, we need to figure out workforce, shipbuilding programs are behind, all these different things. And at the same time, I was spending time at Stanford HAI, which is the Center for Human-Centered Technology, and we were kind of publishing the AI index, and we were looking at AI trends in different industries and sectors that are getting affected. And one of them was manufacturing by AI and being improved, actually. And we were looking at knowledge workers that were actually getting improvements, and HR was one of them as well. So you take that and you take the macro stuff, and then just the lived experience for someone I knew, I just started talking to different HR leaders, just asking them. And what was interesting is you'd hear the same problem at a SpaceX as you would at like a 10% machine shop that is tiny. And it's like, okay, these people are struggling with the same things and they're using the same service provider. That tells you something about.
It's a universal problem.
Yep.
It sounds like you wouldn't have started Laborup if it weren't for the time we're living in, where things are possible today with Gen AI that weren't possible before. Can you just talk through some of the things that are possible today that weren't possible before?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, to start any company, the market has to be there.
Yeah.
And I think startups always flourish when there's like an exponential increase in demand where it's actually growing. When you try to enter a market that's kind of stable, it usually is hard for new entrants. So you kind of need this turmoil that's going on because of growth, and that allows for new entrants to come in. If you look at any company that's worked, that's really what happened. So there's that part that I think wasn't there maybe like 2020 and before. And there's a lot of companies that try to do this, and there's a big graveyard. Right. And then the other thing was the technology piece. So where a lot of companies really failed in our industry, and why a lot of these customers always went back to traditional staffing, was it became operationally complex. So if you're trying to think about the jobs to be done around recruiting, talking to people, coordination, outreach, all these different things, software wasn't there just yet.
Right.
Like just pure RPA or just bots weren't that good. But now with LLMs that can contextualize stuff, and it becomes a lot better. So, I mean, a lot of that has been enabled by the last 2-3 years. And if you think about most staffing firms, I hate to say this, they're really call centers.
Yes.
And now with voice AI, it really unlocks an ability to do the same work of recruiting in a more efficient and scalable way.
It's a really good point. And also the comment about RPAs, like people kind of forget that there was like a point in time where RPAs were going to solve all the small manual tasks.
Yes.
But it was kind of like algorithmic AI, right? It wasn't really like creative Gen AI.
Yep.
And that's kind of a very sort of different feel for today. Yep. And UiPath was like went public, it was a kind of a darling of the RPA industry. So fast forward to today, there's more that can be unlocked with LLMs than there were.
And I think part of the problem was it was too deterministic, and you had to codify a lot of these things. Whereas, there's always going to be edge cases, where the deterministic path doesn't work. And I think LLMs, their ability to kind of obviously statistically reason around the different, and even with the hallucinations that are still happening and getting better, but it's like way better than before.
So pivoting a little bit to selling the product.
Yep.
Talk about your first customer.
Yeah.
And how you got it and like lessons learned from that experience.
Yeah. So actually, one of our very first customers was actually a referral from someone I knew. It's like at the time, we didn't even have a product. Yeah. It was just like, hey, there's this inkling of an idea. We think it's super interesting and important. And I think because the problem is so severe, they're willing to just take a bet. But I think one of the things that we learned even with that first customer was just the notion of that trust does matter in manufacturing, especially in like really older industries that are more in-person sales, relationship-based. So, but really, I mean, the thing they took a bet on was like, hey, if you can solve this issue for us, and if you can do what you say you're going to do, then, hey, we'll give you a try. And I think the beauty around what we're doing is we really went in with a more of like an outcome model where it's like, hey, only pay us when we do the thing you want us to do.
Right.
So that makes it easy for someone to try you as opposed to trying to get them to pay something up front.
Yeah, it does make it a lot easier to say yes. When you think about advice you would give to other founders trying to get their first customer, there's the build trust, right, that you just kind of talked about. Anything else that you would sort of pass on as like the unlock?
Just you, the founder, matters a lot. I think one of our first customers, this machine shop called Oak Ridge Toy Engineering out in Oak Ridge. So they're an aerospace and defense contractor. 6 months later, we were doing this kind of video with them, and I asked him, like, why'd you decide to work with us? And he pretty much said, like, you had gumption. It's like people sense when you have passion and you really care about the thing that you're. So even if you don't know all the salesy tactics and all these things and you're not fully polished, when you really approach people with passion that, hey, I want to solve this for you and I'm going to show up and do the thing, people will take a bet. I mean, and that's about what it is. And I think anytime we're trying to use anything and there's like a startup that's really passionate and available, we'll choose that any day over.
I mean, us too. Obviously in investing, but even in like the software we use to run MVP Capital, same sort of concept. How do you scale passion as you get bigger and add more customers? How do you make sure that like vibe stays?
I would say it just goes back to a few things. Hiring, find people that are passionate. I think that matters a lot. And then just leadership, because leadership is just inspiring others. So how can you transfer more of that passion? I mean, even in companies and I think in our industry, it's a little easier to find people that are passionate because there's a macro patriotic notion around what we're doing. So find those people that care about that. One of the sales folks that we just hired, her grandpa worked on the railroad. So there's passion behind that.
Right.
But even in things like selling compliance software, I'm sure there's people that are passionate about it. Find those people.
It's a great point. And we actually have a company in the GRC space, which is governance, risk, and compliance software, former CISO, and he is as passionate about that subject as anyone I've ever met. But I do agree. We've done a lot in the industrial space. We've done a lot in the healthcare space, and it's easier to find people who are super passionate and maybe mission aligned with solving those big meaty problems because they're right there in front of you.
Exactly.
But it's a point that's really well taken in scaling up your team. Going back to commercialization, talk to us about how you go from a proof of concept or a pilot to a full-blown contract. And if there's any practical takeaways that you've learned there.
Yeah, I mean, there's some tactical stuff around how you kind of approach that. But my advice and the thing I remind myself all the time is just do a good job. Because I especially with manufacturing, there's only so many windows of opportunity when they do try new things. Yeah. So when you do get the chance, treat it like the Super Bowl and do such a good job with the first initial set, in our context, hiring they give you. And if you do that, they expand with you. Because at the end of the day, they're outcome driven. So when you really anchor on those outcomes and communicate how you're driving those outcomes, that actually earns you the right to do a little bit more work. So one of our customers, big tier one automotive, they gave us a few roles to start with at one of their facilities in Tennessee. We did a really great job. And then that kind of led to the releasing a new product next year. We're actually a line item on their budget, and they're hiring a lot of people. So that's how you really earn that. And it's just do a good job. And it feels simplistic, but I think sometimes people, especially people in tech and startups, they want these perfect formulas and all these things, but it's do a good job and you'll get more if you do a good job.
Do a good job. And actually, there's a sports analogy in there, which is don't look past your current competitor, or in this case, your current partner. It's do a great job for this customer, and then you earn the right to grow with them or other customers, right? But it's not a stepping stone.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even one of the customers that I think one of our biggest customers actually, we did an amazing job with them, and they have referred us to 2 people now. And it's just, that's how.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like that. All right. Then last question on commercialization. A lot of bigger companies, I'm not sure if this is the case in manufacturing, but maybe it is, have innovation groups.
Yes.
Do you think innovation groups are a good way to get into a large enterprise, or do you think it's better to try and go into sort of the business line decision makers directly?
Yes. I would say it depends on what you're selling, right? Because if what you're purely selling is innovation, and you're leading with technology, 100%. The innovation group, whatever their commercial venture arm, is usually very helpful. But if you're driving outcomes, I would say going to the operators makes more sense. I mean, because at the end of the day, a lot of what we're driving is actually either reducing cost or improving productivity. So we are really on the P&L. So I think the closer we are to the operations folks, the better. But with the larger companies, as you're starting to think about how do you roll out across multiple facilities. Yeah. So if you're working with a big Fortune 100 manufacturer that has maybe 30 facilities across the U.S., sure, we start with one. But when we're trying to deploy across all the different facilities, then I think whatever innovation group exists within the company starts making sense.
Because they can kind of share the learnings across a broader group. Yeah.
Yep.
That's really interesting. Actually, that's the first time someone sort of talked about the dynamic of using the innovation group to scale a deployment versus to win the initial one. Very, very cool.
Yep.
All right, Simba, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking some time to chat with me.
Yeah, no.
It was really fun.
Loved it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.